15 years without so much as a handshake. I'm Harvey Wilson, a 51-year-old senior driver at High Ale Syndicate Freight, based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I joined them when they had just 3 trucks and a vision. Now they have 28 rigs, contracts with top distributors in the Midwest, and a new operations manager who seems clueless about loyalty. When High Ale was acquired by an investment firm last spring, I sensed changes were imminent. I just didn't expect them to target me first. The new ops manager, Darren Kelly, flaunted an MBA and slick shoes that had never touched a truck cab. He'd been scrutinizing my salary for weeks, making comments about legacy costs in meetings. That morning, after completing a 3-day haul to Denver on schedule as always, Darren summoned me to his glass-walled office. The termination papers were already waiting. My replacement, a recent driving school graduate, lingered in the break room. "We need to streamline operations," Darren stated, avoiding eye contact. "It's nothing personal. It's just about numbers. Your salary is nearly double what we can afford for a new driver." I nodded silently, refraining from arguing or mentioning that Thompson Foods had relied on us for 8 years because I helped their dock manager move his mother's possessions when the nursing home shut down. I didn't bring up the fact that Western Distributing renewed their contract 3 times because I consistently ensured their emergency shipments were delivered, even on holidays. 15 years of flawless safety records, never missed a delivery window. I knew every client by name. "Severance is 2 weeks, Darren continued, sliding the papers across his desk. "Company policy." I signed without glancing at them, handed over my keys, my security badge, and my company credit card, and thanked him for the opportunity. In the parking lot, I sat in my pickup for nearly an hour, not feeling angry, just reflective. I thought of the clients who had become akin to friends over the years, the Christmas cards I received from shipping managers across 6 states, how this Darren didn't grasp that shipments were as much about relationships as they were about diesel. My phone buzzed with a text from Bill Thompson himself. "Heard what happened. Those corporate idiots better call me." Then another from Jerry at Western. "Is it true you're leaving? Let's talk before you decide anything." By the time I pulled out of High Ale's lot, 3 more messages had arrived. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I drove home and sat on my porch watching the sunset cast an orange glow over the Oklahoma plains. They had let go of a driver, but lost something far more significant. I began my journey at High Ale when it was just Old Man Jenkins and his son trying to build something from scratch. Jenkins taught me everything: how to navigate mountain passes in winter, how to communicate with clients, how to resolve issues on the road without calling for help. "The freight business isn't about trucks," he'd say. "It's about trust." For 15 years, I had built that trust 1 mile at a time. When the massive ice storm struck Kansas City in 2016, I was the one who delivered medical supplies to 3 hospitals. When floods washed out the main highway to Wichita, I found alternative routes. When Thompson Foods needed an urgent shipment of packaging after a warehouse fire, I drove nonstop for 36 hours to ensure it was delivered. My wife Elaine understood the routine. I'd be away for days sometimes, but I always returned with stories. Our kids grew up with me on the road half the time, but they never doubted I'd be present for significant events. Sure, I missed some baseball games, but never a graduation or birthday. When Jenkins sold the company 5 years ago, changes began to creep in gradually. New policies, more paperwork, less flexibility. The new management retained me because clients specifically requested me. "Send Harvey," they'd say. "We know it will get there if he's driving." Darren joined the team 6 months ago, fresh from a big logistics firm in Chicago, and began discussing efficiency metrics and driver rotation. He couldn't understand why we allowed certain clients to set their own delivery windows and questioned why Thompson Foods received priority treatment. "They're not our largest account," he'd argue in meetings. "No," I'd explain, "but they're our most loyal. They've been with us since the beginning." he'd flash that corporate smile saying, "Loyalty doesn't show up on balance sheets." I noticed cracks forming, whispers about rate increases for our oldest clients, and how Darren hired drivers based on how little they'd work for, rather than their driving ability. I watched him cut corners on maintenance. 3 weeks ago, I confronted him after he berated Dave, one of our best mechanics, for spending too much time on preventative maintenance. "You're going to lose good people," I cautioned. Darren laughed. "Everyone's replaceable, Harvey. That's business 101. I didn't push back. I just returned to my roots, checking in with clients, making deliveries, and keeping operations running while the foundation crumbled beneath us. Little did I know I would be the first to be replaced. After sitting on my porch for an hour, I finally checked those messages. Bill Thompson wanted to meet for coffee tomorrow. Jerry from Western Distributing asked if I had plans to drive for another company. Maria at Lakeland Foods sent a flurry of angry emojis followed by, "Call me." I went inside, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. Elaine was working late at the hospital, leaving the house feeling too quiet. I pulled out my logbooks, 15 years of routes, deliveries, and relationships. High-Ale didn't own those. They'd fired the driver but overlooked the connections I had built. My phone rang. It was Jenkins, who must have heard the news through the grapevine. "Damn shame what they're doing to my company," he said, his voice gruff with age and anger. "I never should have sold." "You did what you had to do," I replied. "Your wife's medical bills." "Still," he interrupted, "I built that place on relationships, not spreadsheets. These new guys don't understand the business." After we hung up, I stared at my hands, calloused and weathered, from years of driving, loading, and problem-solving. 15 years gone with a single signature. The following morning, I met Bill Thompson at Riverside Cafe. He got straight to the point. "I heard what happened," he said, sliding into the booth. "Bunch of idiots. You've saved our bacon more times than I can count." "Just doing my job," I replied. "No," Bill shook his head. "You did more than your job. Remember, when our cooling system failed at the Broken Arrow warehouse? You got that shipment to our backup facility at 2 a.m. during a snowstorm?" I shrugged. "Freight doesn't wait for favorable weather." Bill leaned in. "We have a contract with High-Ale, but it includes a 30-day termination clause. Who are you driving for next? Because that's where our business is going." I hadn't even considered my next steps yet, but Bill's words planted a seed. By lunchtime, I met with Jerry from Western, who echoed the same sentiment. By dinner, 3 more clients reached out with similar messages. Driving home, I passed High-Ale's yard and spotted my old truck, already reassigned to that young driver. Through the office windows, I could see Darren in a meeting, pointing at charts on a screen. That's when it hit me. Darren viewed drivers as interchangeable parts, but clients saw us as relationships. For 15 years, I had been the face of High-Ale to most of our major accounts. I wasn't just a driver. I was their trusted partner. I pulled into my driveway with my mind racing. I called my friend Frank, who had left High-Ale last year to drive for a competitor. "What would it take?" I asked, "to start our own company?" Frank paused for a moment. "You serious about this, Harvey?" "Never been more serious in my life." "You'd need capital, licenses, insurance," he began listing. "And clients," I added, "which I've got." That night, Elaine found me at the kitchen table surrounded by notes and calculations. "What's all this?" she asked. "I think," I said slowly, "I'm starting a freight company." 3 days after being fired, I walked back into High-Ale's office, not to plead for my job. I was beyond that, but to collect my personal items from my locker and to say goodbye to a few drivers I had mentored over the years. Darren spotted me in the break room chatting with Doug and Alejandro, 2 drivers who had started under my guidance. His face darkened as he marched over. "Harvey, this is private property," he said. "You can't just walk in and disrupt operations." "Just collecting my things," I replied, holding up my old thermos and the family photo that had been in my locker, saying goodbye to friends. Darren crossed his arms. I've heard you've been talking to our clients." So, that's what this was about. Word travels fast in the freight business. "They called me," I corrected, "to ask why I wasn't delivering their shipments anymore." "Well, stop it," Darren snapped. "Those are high-ale accounts. Interfering with our client relationships could be construed as tortious interference with business relationships." He pronounced each word as if he had rehearsed it with a lawyer. Maybe he had. "Can't control who calls me," I replied, keeping my tone steady, "or what decisions they make about their shipping needs." Darren stepped closer. "Listen carefully, Harvey. You signed non-compete and non-solicitation agreements when you joined High-Ale. If you try to poach our clients, we'll bury you in legal fees. I hadn't anticipated this. I couldn't afford a legal battle. 15 years of loyalty, and now they were threatening to sue me for taking phone calls." "Check those agreements," I said, recalling something important. "They expired after 10 years. Jenkins made sure of that." Darren's face flushed. He clearly hadn't done his homework. "Regardless," he regained his composure, "this is your one warning. Stay away from our clients." I nodded, gathered my belongings, and walked out. In the parking lot, Doug and Alejandro caught up with me. "He's running this place into the ground," Doug muttered, "cutting corners on maintenance, pushing drivers to break hours of service rules. 3 guys quit last week," Alejandro added. "Replace them with rookies who will work for peanuts." I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made my stomach churn. It wasn't just a business concern, it was a safety issue. Poorly maintained trucks and overworked drivers are a recipe for disaster. "You two be careful," was all I said. Back home, I called Jenkins to inquire about those agreements. He confirmed my memory. The non-compete and non-solicitation clauses had expired years ago. "I never believed in tying people down forever," he explained. "Good business is built on choice, not force." The next day, I received a certified letter from High-Hale's lawyers threatening legal action if I continued soliciting their clients. Pure intimidation. They had no case, but they hoped I wouldn't realize that or couldn't afford to fight it. That afternoon, Bill Thompson called. "High-Ale just tried to raise our rates by 15% with no explanation," he fumed. When I mentioned your name, their sales guy got all squirrely. One by one, similar calls came in. High-Ale was scrambling to retain clients using strong-arm tactics and sudden rate hikes, classic desperation moves. That evening, Frank came over with pizza and beer. We sat on my back deck, hammering out a business plan. He had already gathered information on insurance, licensing requirements, and startup costs. The numbers were daunting, but not insurmountable, especially if we began with just 2 or 3 trucks. "We'd need a solid base of guaranteed contracts," Frank stated, taking a swig of beer. I glanced at my phone, buzzing with client messages throughout the day. "I don't think that's going to be a problem." 1 week later, I sat in a small office I rented in an industrial park on the east side of Tulsa. Frank had dipped into his 401k, and I'd withdrawn money from my savings. Together, we secured financing for 2 trucks. It didn't seem like much compared to High-Ale's fleet, but it was a start. We filed the paperwork to establish Wilson and Reynolds Freight LLC, applied for our DOT authority, and secured insurance. It was costly, but our clean driving records helped. We even found a decent used truck that would be ready the following week. What I hadn't anticipated was a call from Patty, High-Hale's longtime dispatcher. "Harvey, got a minute?" Her voice was hushed, as if she were hiding in a bathroom or storage closet. "Always, Patty. What's going on?" "It's worse than you know," she said. "After you left, Darren brought in a consultant who's been combing through all the contracts looking for ways to squeeze more money out of everyone." She paused, and I heard papers rustling. But that's not the worst part. They're planning to shut down the Tulsa operation entirely in 6 months and move everything to Kansas City for some tax incentive deal. Everyone here is getting laid off. They just don't realize it yet. The news hit me like a physical blow. High hail had been a fixture in Tulsa for decades. 40-some families depended on those jobs. "How sure are you about this?" I asked. 100%. I saw the documents myself when I was filing. Darren left them on his desk, real careless. They've already started looking for warehouse space in Kansas City. After she hung up, I sat at my empty desk, staring at the wall. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the people who would be blindsided 6 months from now. Frank arrived with coffee and donuts, excited about the used Peterbilt he had found at a good price. He stopped short when he saw my expression. What happened? I told him about Patty's revelations. His demeanor hardened as I spoke. "So, all this talk about efficiency and streamlining was just smoke?" he said. "They're planning to dump everyone anyway." "Seems that way." Frank sat down, coffee forgotten. "We need to think bigger, Harvey." "What do you mean?" "If they're shutting down in 6 months anyway, we should be planning to acquire as much of that business as possible, not just a client here and there. All of it." He was right. This wasn't merely about getting back at Darren or saving my own career anymore. It was about preserving what Jenkins had built, the relationships, the trust, the jobs. We spent the remainder of the day revising our business plan, contacted our bank about financing for more trucks, and researched warehouse space that could serve as a modest terminal. By evening, we had outlined something far more ambitious than our original 2-truck operation. The next morning, I called Jenkins and asked him to meet me for lunch. I shared everything, what Patty had told me, our plans with Frank, and the challenges we faced. Jenkins listened quietly, hands folded on the table. When I finished, he nodded once. "How much do you need?" he asked. "Sir?" "For startup capital, I've set aside some money. Was saving it for a fishing boat, but this seems more important." I hadn't expected this. "We couldn't ask you to—" "You're not asking," Jenkins interrupted. "I'm offering for those people at High Ale. Most of them I hired myself. I've known their families for years. I'll be damned if I sit by while some corporate vulture scatters them to the wind." He pulled out his checkbook right there in the restaurant. "Let's build something right this time," he said. "Something that lasts." Over the next 2 weeks, Wilson, Reynolds, and Jenkins Freight took shape with remarkable speed. Jenkins's investment, combined with our resources and a business loan, provided enough capital to lease 5 trucks, secure a small terminal with a warehouse, and hire key personnel. We began with the essentials. Patty gave her notice at High Hail and joined us as dispatcher. 2 experienced mechanics followed, tired of High Ale's cost-cutting on maintenance. We hired 5 drivers, all veterans with excellent safety records, who had either already departed High Ale or were planning to. The trucks arrived, 3 Peterbilts and 2 Kenworths. Nothing fancy, but solid, reliable machines. We painted them midnight blue with silver trim, emblazoned with our new company logo on the doors. Each morning I arrived at our modest terminal before dawn and felt a surge of pride seeing those trucks lined up, ready to roll. Meanwhile, High Ale was spiraling. After I left, 3 major clients had pulled their business, not to us yet, but to competitors. They cited service concerns, but they were simply waiting to see if our new operation could handle their needs. Word of the Kansas City move had leaked, and morale at High Ale was at an all-time low. Drivers were leaving weekly, deliveries were being missed. Darren was in full panic mode, slashing rates to hold onto clients while cutting corners everywhere else. We moved cautiously, building our infrastructure before taking on too much business. Jenkins insisted on doing things right: proper training, thorough maintenance protocols, and fair pay scales. "The money will follow if we focus on quality," he kept insisting. By the 3rd week, we were ready to directly approach clients. I began with Thompson Foods, my longest relationship. Bill Thompson met me in his office, examined our rate sheets, insurance certificates, and driver qualifications, and asked pointed questions about capacity and contingency plans. "This all looks solid, Harvey," he said finally. "But High Ale, just drop their rates below yours. They're desperate to keep us. They can't sustain those rates, I replied, and they can't match our service. Plus, there's something you should know. I informed him of the Kansas City move. Bill's expression darkened. So all their promises about local service and quick response times will be impossible to fulfill once they relocate? Bill nodded slowly. We'll need to phase this transition carefully. Can't afford any supply chain disruptions. We have a plan for that, I assured him, outlining our gradual implementation strategy. By the end of the meeting, we had a handshake deal. Thompson Foods would move 20% of their shipping to us immediately, with the remainder transitioning over the next 60 days. Similar discussions unfolded with Western Distributing, Lakeland Foods, and 6 other major clients. Not everyone signed immediately, but most began shifting portions of their business our way. We weren't merely acquiring clients, we were gaining good people, too. Each week, another High-Ale employee would approach us looking for work. We couldn't hire them all, but we took the best: experienced dispatchers, skilled mechanics, reliable drivers. Then came the moment that affirmed we were on the right path. Doug, the driver I had mentored who was still at High-Ale, called one evening. Harvey, you won't believe this. Darren just announced they lost the Cornerstone Builder account. Cornerstone was High-Ale's largest client, accounting for 30% of their business. What happened? I asked, surprised. Word is they found out about the Kansas City move from one of their contacts at Western. They've already signed with someone else. I asked the obvious question. Who'd they sign with? Doug laughed. That's the best part, not you guys. They went with National Logistics. Darren's been running around screaming that you somehow engineered it, but everyone knows it's his own fault. The plan was working better than we had hoped. We didn't need to actively poach all of High-Ale's business. The company was imploding on its own. 2 months after being fired, I found myself back behind the wheel, delivering a crucial shipment to Thompson Foods. Their main production line had experienced a breakdown, and they needed replacement parts by morning, just like old times. Except this time, the truck I drove had my name on the door. As I backed up to Thompson's loading dock at 4 a.m., Bill himself was waiting, despite the early hour. You're a lifesaver, Harvey, he said, as I handed him the manifest. All right. Production manager says we can be back online within 2 hours now. I helped unload and then joined Bill in his office for coffee. He seemed preoccupied, checking his phone repeatedly. Everything okay? I inquired, just waiting for confirmation. On something, he said, pouring more coffee. Should be any minute now. His phone buzzed. He read the message, then smiled. It's official. As of this morning, we've terminated our contract with High-Ale. You're now handling 100% of our freight. I knew this was coming. We had gradually taken on more of their business, but hearing it formalized felt monumental. Appreciate your trust, I said simply. Trust is why you got it, Bill replied. But you should know you're not the only one. Western Distributing. Cut ties with them yesterday. Lakeland Foods the day before. From what I hear, High-Ale has lost 80% of their Tulsa business in the last 6 weeks. On my drive back to our terminal, I passed High-Ale's yard. The lot was half empty, and a for lease sign had appeared on the fence. Through the office window, I could see Darren on the phone, gesturing wildly. I didn't feel the satisfaction. I had expected just a quiet sense that things were unfolding as they should. We hadn't stolen anything. We had simply built something better, something grounded in the values that had always mattered in this business. Back at our terminal, Jenkins met me in the break room. Have you heard, he asked, about High-Ale losing most of their clients? Yeah, Jenkins shook his head. More than that, they're declaring bankruptcy effective immediately. 6 months after being fired from High-Ale, I stood in the yard of Wilson, Reynolds, and Jenkins Freight, watching our fleet, now 15 trucks strong, head out for the day's deliveries. Our small terminal had expanded to include a proper warehouse and maintenance facility. We employed 32 people, most of them former high-ale workers. High-ale syndicate freight no longer existed. After the bankruptcy, their assets had been liquidated, and their contracts scattered to various competitors. We had acquired 3 of their trucks at auction, good machines that had been poorly maintained. Our mechanics had spent weeks getting them back into proper shape. Darren had left town. Last I heard, he took a position with a logistics firm in Phoenix. The investment group that had purchased High Ale from Jenkins had written off the entire venture as a loss. Jenkins joined me, in the yard, leaning on his cane. At 73, he wasn't actively managing day-to-day operations, but he visited most mornings to have coffee with the drivers and share his wisdom. "Never thought I'd be back in the freight business," he mused, watching a Peterbilt pull out, loaded with industrial equipment bound for Kansas City. "Having regrets?" I asked. He laughed. "Hell no. Best decision I've made in years." We walked back inside, where Patty was coordinating the day's routes, and Frank was reviewing maintenance schedules with our lead mechanic. The place hummed with purposeful activity. "You know what makes this work?" Jenkins said, pouring himself another cup of coffee. "It's not the trucks or the contracts or even the capital. It's the people." He wasn't wrong. We had built something valuable because we valued the right things. That afternoon, I took a rare day off, drove out to the lake with Elaine, and sat on the dock with fishing poles, not really caring if we caught anything. "Happy?" she asked. Simply. I considered the question, watching the sun glint off the water. "Yeah," I said, "I am. Sometimes the long haul isn't about the miles, it's about the journey back to what matters."